Take a look at the national debt clock, or pull up the latest figures from the U.S. Treasury. You'll see a number that the human brain cannot process. It's currently racing past $35 trillion and charging hard toward $38 trillion. If you took 38 trillion $1 bills and stacked them on top of each other, the tower wouldn't just reach the International Space Station. It would shoot past the moon and keep going into deep space. For decades, we've been told this number doesn't matter. Politicians assured us deficits are irrelevant because we owe it to ourselves. Economists dismissed it as manageable, as long as GDP keeps growing. They treated the national debt like a high score in a video game. Looks intimidating, but has no real-world consequences. But in 2024, everything changed. We've crossed into a new reality where the debt is no longer just an abstract number on a screen. It's become a living beast that's actively devouring the federal budget from the inside. For the first time in American history, the United States government is now spending more money on interest payments than it spends on the entire Pentagon. Think about that for a second. We're spending more to pay bondholders from the past than we are to fund the military of the present. More on interest than we spend on Medicaid. The interest bill alone is closing in on $1 trillion per year. This is what's called a debt spiral. And here's the terrifying truth. There's no conventional escape from this trap. The government can't cut its way out. It can't tax its way out. And it absolutely cannot default without triggering a global financial apocalypse. So what's the plan? How does the most powerful nation on Earth make $38 trillion disappear? The answer is already in motion. It's a strategy that's been used by every major empire in history when their backs were against the wall. It's quiet, it's legal, and it's designed to make sure you don't realize what's happening until your life savings can't buy what you thought they would. Before we go further, if understanding how this affects your financial future matters to you, subscribe now. What you're about to learn will change how you see every dollar in your bank account and every investment decision you'll ever make. Now let's start by understanding why this problem can't be solved the traditional way. Let's talk about what happens when a country owes $38 trillion. In your personal life, when debt gets out of control, you have options. You tighten your belt, you sell things, you work overtime, you cut every expense that isn't absolutely necessary. But a government doesn't operate like a household, and that's where the nightmare begins. Roughly 70% of the federal budget is mandatory spending. Social Security checks that must go out, Medicare payments that cannot be stopped, interest payments that must be made or the entire system collapses. These aren't choices. They're obligations locked into law, backed by millions of voters who will destroy any politician who touches them. So when the interest bill hits $900 billion, then $1 trillion, then $1.5 trillion, the government can't just decide to stop paying. It has to borrow more money to pay the interest on the money it already borrowed. This is the debt spiral. You're using a new credit card to make the minimum payment on your old credit cards. Each year, the total debt grows. Each year, the interest payment grows. Each year, you need to borrow even more just to stay afloat. The math is brutal and simple. If nothing changes, within a decade, interest payments will exceed all discretionary spending combined. That means no money for roads, education, research, infrastructure, or anything else the government does, unless they borrow even more. Now, throughout history, when nations face this kind of debt crisis, they have exactly 3 options. Only 3. And I'm going to explain why 2 of them are completely impossible in modern America. Option 1. Austerity. This is the responsible path. Slash spending to the bone, raise taxes dramatically, run budget surpluses for decades until you've paid down the debt. Sounds simple, right? Here's the problem. The numbers required are politically insane. To balance the budget today without touching Social Security or Medicare, You would need to eliminate the entire Department of Defense. Every aircraft carrier, every soldier, every weapon system, gone. Or you could keep defense and instead raise income taxes by 75%. Or you could cut Social Security benefits by 40% for everyone, immediately. Any politician who proposes any version of real austerity doesn't just lose their next election, they get destroyed. The American economy has become structurally dependent on government spending. Cutting it triggers instant recession, possibly depression. So austerity is a fantasy. Option 2, default. The government could simply announce, "We're not paying." This is what Argentina has done, what Russia has done, what Greece nearly did. You walk up to your creditors and say the money isn't coming. But for the United States, this isn't just economically devastating, it's civilization ending. The entire global financial system runs on one fundamental assumption. U.S. Treasury bonds are risk-free. They are the bedrock. Every pension fund, every central bank, every trade agreement, every financial contract on Earth is built on the belief that America pays its debts. If the U.S. defaults, global trade freezes. Credit markets seize, banks collapse. It would make 2008 look like a practice run. The dollar would lose its reserve currency status. The American standard of living would crater by 40% or more overnight. So explicit default is off the table. That leaves only one path, the path every empire eventually takes. Option 3, the invisible default. You don't refuse to pay the debt. You pay every penny of it, but you pay it back in money that's worth significantly less than when you borrowed it. You inflate the debt away. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is documented monetary policy with a 100-year track record. The mechanism is called financial repression, and it's already underway. We don't need to speculate about how this works. We have a blueprint. The United States has done this before. In 1945, after World War II, U.S. debt hit 119% of GDP. The government owed more than the entire economy produced in a year. Economists predicted disaster. They predicted default. They were wrong. What happened instead was a masterclass in quiet theft. For the next 15 years, the Federal Reserve held interest rates artificially low, around 2.5%, while inflation ran at 6% to 8% annually. That means if you bought a government bond in 1945, you were guaranteed to lose purchasing power every single year. But here's the key. You got your dollars back. You got every penny you were promised. Those dollars just bought half as much by the time you cashed out. This transferred trillions of dollars in wealth from bondholders to the government. The debt-to-GDP ratio collapsed from 119% to 30% by 1970. Not because they paid it off with taxes, because they inflated the value of the debt away while the economy grew. It worked. And now they're doing it again. The modern version uses 3 sophisticated tools that make the theft almost invisible. Tool number 1, the captive audience. In a free market, if you're a terrible borrower, say $38 trillion in debt with no plan to repay, investors demand high interest rates. They charge 8%, 10%, maybe 15% to compensate for the risk. But the government has rigged the game through banking regulations. Laws like Basel III and Dodd-Frank require banks, pension funds, and insurance companies to hold U.S. Treasury bonds. They're classified as high-quality liquid assets. Banks must own them to satisfy regulatory requirements. It doesn't matter if the yield is 0.1%. It doesn't matter if they're losing money. They have no choice. This creates artificial demand. It suppresses interest rates below what a free market would charge. Your pension fund isn't buying treasury bonds because they're a good investment. It's buying them because it's illegal not to. Tool number 2, the redefinition of inflation. Social Security payments increase with inflation. Treasury inflation-protected securities pay more when inflation rises. The government has a multi-billion-dollar incentive to keep official inflation numbers low. So they changed how inflation is measured. In the 1980s, the Bureau of Labor Statistics introduced substitution bias into the Consumer Price Index. The logic: if steak gets too expensive, you'll buy chicken instead, so your cost of living hasn't really increased. The CPI now tracks the chicken, not the steak, even though your quality of life just dropped. They added hedonic adjustments. If a new car costs $10,000 more, but has better technology, they count that as a quality improvement, not a price increase. The price rise gets adjusted down. If we measured inflation using the 1980 methodology today, the official rate would be roughly double. This saves the government hundreds of billions in obligations while gaslighting you about the real cost of living. Tool number 3, the printing press as policy. When foreign countries stop buying U.S. debt, and China and Japan have been net sellers for years, someone has to buy it. Enter the Federal Reserve. The Fed prints new dollars and uses them to purchase treasury bonds. This is quantitative easing. It artificially lowers yields, making the government's interest payments manageable. But those new dollars flood into the economy. Asset prices explode. Stocks hit record highs. Real estate becomes unaffordable. Your 401k looks bigger. Your home value increases. But it's a mirage. You have more dollars chasing the same amount of real goods and services. The result: a silent transfer of wealth from anyone holding cash to anyone holding assets. This process is not evenly distributed. It's not fair. In fact, it's the primary driver of the wealth inequality crisis in America. When the Federal Reserve creates $1 trillion new dollars, they don't mail checks to working families. They inject that money into the financial system, buying bonds from major banks and financial institutions. Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, and BlackRock get the new money first. They get it at near zero interest rates. They immediately use it to buy assets, stocks, real estate, corporate bonds. Asset prices surge. By the time this new money reaches the average worker in the form of wages, if it ever does, prices have already risen. The grocery bill is higher, rent is higher, healthcare is higher. This is the Cantillon Effect, named after an 18th century economist who recognized that where new money enters the economy matters enormously. The wealthy get the money before inflation. The working class gets it after inflation. This is why, since 2008, we've seen a K-shaped recovery. The top 10% who own assets have seen their wealth double or triple. The bottom 90% who live on wages have seen their purchasing power stagnate or decline. The national debt is being erased by liquidating the middle class. The death of safe savings. This forces a complete rethinking of financial security. For 40 years, the standard advice was simple. Save 10% of your income, keep it in a bank or government bonds, and watch it grow slowly but safely. That advice is now financial suicide. If you hold cash earning 2% while real inflation runs at 6%, you're losing 4% per year. That's not safety. That's guaranteed impoverishment. The government has engineered a system where you must take risks just to preserve your wealth. You're forced to speculate, to buy stocks, real estate, cryptocurrency, just to outrun the devaluation of your savings. The safe option has been deliberately destroyed. We've entered the era of forced speculation. There's one final tool that hasn't been deployed yet. It's being built right now, and it will give the government complete control over your financial life. The central bank digital currency. Right now, the government's power is limited by physical cash. If they set negative interest rates to accelerate inflation, you could withdraw your money and store it under your mattress. Cash provides an exit from the banking system. A digital dollar removes that escape hatch. With a purely digital currency, the Federal Reserve gains total control. They can implement negative interest rates instantly, deducting 1% from your account every month to force you to spend. They can set expiration dates on stimulus money, requiring you to spend it within 30 days or lose it. They can track every transaction and tax unrealized gains in real time. This isn't science fiction. China is already doing this with the digital yuan. They can monitor spending, restrict purchases, and shut off access to money for anyone who steps out of line. The digital dollar is the ultimate solution to the debt crisis. It gives the state the power to manage the velocity of money and confiscate wealth with a keystroke. The push toward a cashless society isn't about convenience. It's about eliminating your last avenue of escape when the great wealth transfer accelerates. The United States is not going to repay $38 trillion. It's going to devalue it. The process is already underway and will continue for the next decade or more. The government will run inflation at 4% to 6% while keeping official interest rates at 2% to 3%. That negative real yield will quietly erase trillions in debt value. Your savings account will show higher numbers, but those numbers will buy progressively less. The winners in this system are those who understand the game and own scarce assets. Real estate that can't be printed. Businesses that produce real value. Potentially commodities and alternative currencies that exist outside government control. The losers are those who trust in cash, who believe their government bonds are safe, who think their pension will provide the retirement they were promised. The American dream of working hard, saving money, and building wealth through responsibility is being systematically dismantled by monetary policy. We're not witnessing economic mismanagement. We're witnessing a deliberate strategy to transfer wealth from savers to the state. The $38 trillion debt isn't a problem to be solved. It's a problem to be inflated away, with you footing the bill in purchasing power you'll never get back. The question isn't whether this will happen. It's already happening. The only question is whether you'll recognize it in time to protect yourself. Because when governments get desperate enough, history shows they don't just manipulate the currency. They change the rules entirely. They simply take what they need. If you want to understand just how far a government will go when its back is against the wall, you need to know about 1933, the year the United States made it a federal crime to own gold. 10 years in prison for holding the one asset that protected you from inflation. But that's a story for next time.